Welcome to Ham Radio Basics Live, Season 4, Episode 1, Josh from Ham Radio Crash Course Rebroadcast. Welcome to this very special rebroadcast as I feature one of my very favorite ham radio YouTubers, Josh from Ham Radio Crash Course. So without any further ado, let's roll that clip in its entirety. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Ham Radio Basics Live, Season 1, Episode 8. Very special guest, Josh from Ham Radio Crash Course. Josh, how are you this evening?
I'm good. I just wrapped up some meetings for my day job, and it's going to be fun to just hang out and chat for a little while.
Tell me about that. Yeah, it seems like lately I've been having meetings after meetings after meetings, and just I'm with you on that. And just before we get started here, I have to say this. Josh and I talked a little bit before the show, but Josh was the first person I found on YouTube. And just, watching his videos just really got me going, got me started. And, it seems like there almost isn't a topic that Josh hasn't covered. Seriously. You've done it. And I think one of my favorite quotes was I had Steve on from Temporarily Offline, and he said, ham radio's the hobby of 1,000 hobbies. And I love that quote. That's one of those ones that always stick with me. Josh, how did you get started in ham radio?
Well, I was introduced to it as a Boy Scout. It was summer camp, and one of the Scoutmasters had a handheld. I think it was a Kenwood, and he was trying to program a repeater or something like that. He wasn't the best person to demonstrate the hobby, but I was like, okay, that's interesting. Maybe I'll hear that, sometime in the future. Fast forward to graduate college. I go to work at Boeing, and I'm doing software integration and test in a lab. And the lab manager there was is a ham. And he said, hey, you kind of into this stuff. You ever thought about ham radio? And then the connection to when I was a scout, I was like, oh yeah, that's that like handheld thing, right? Is that what they do? And, then he started breaking it down. He's like, no, it goes higher frequency than that. And it goes lower frequency than that and all that stuff. And kind of did a good job of, smoothing things out a little bit for me. And this was at Anaheim at the time, the Boeing complex in Anaheim. So we hopped in the car on a lunch break. He drove me over to the HRO in Anaheim, and I walked out with my first radio and a Gordon West book and got my license pretty much, pretty quickly thereafter. And that was it. I was pretty much hooked from that point.
Wow. I say this, I said, it's lethal for someone like you or me to walk into a HRO store. It's just bad news, and bad news for our credit cards too. It's always.
It's kind of scary because you get to a point where you probably have a decent chunk of radios, and you walk into an HRO and you start thinking to yourself, I already have that. All right, I already have something that does that. I don't need that thing because I've already got something, maybe a year or two older, but I'm probably pretty good to go. I don't know if that's scarier, the fact that you walk in and you're like, maybe I don't need something here today. I think that might be worse. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, well, I have that, and I have that, and then you look over, oh, I have that. It's like, wow, yeah, that's one of those things as well. So how did you get started, with your YouTube channel? What prompted you to want to get on YouTube and, help the folks out in the ham radio community?
I promise not to go too long on this. I've answered this before, and I keep trying to get it to a tight little answer, but I've actually been on YouTube since 2006. That predates my ham radio license by a year. And I got on YouTube to kind of make videos about whatever it was that I was hobbying on at the time. So my first video that YouTube picked up is back then, you had like single videos that would get monetized before you became a creator or whatever they have now, was my modification of a 4-foot offset smoker that was made by Brinkman. And it was just kind of a how-to, like going through my process for what I did. And my wife told me, she's like, yeah, you should keep making videos. You obviously enjoy kind of explaining what you've done and sharing knowledge and whatever. So, keep doing it. So she's always encouraged me. And basically fast forward to years upon years of making videos, I became monetized at some point, I think in 2012 or 13 or 15 or something along those lines. And mind you, I really wasn't making ham radio content, just occasionally. But I had finished doing a video a day for over 600 days. I would shoot a video, edit it, post it all in one day. Did that for, like I said, 600 days and just got kind of burnt out. And at the end of it, I was talking to my wife again with always the best ideas. And she said, well, you did a lot these last 2 years. What was like the favorite time you spent making videos? And I said, oh, for sure it was the ham radio content and radio adjacent stuff. And she's like, well, it sounds like you should just not do the dailies, throttle it back a little bit, put a little more effort into the videos and just, release a video, 1 or 2 a week and, see how it goes. And so that's what I did. I didn't even rebrand the channel at this point until 2019 or 2020. It had a different name back then. But in 2018, I pivoted everything over to just ham radio content. And that's what we've been doing ever since.
Wow, that's a great story. And you know what? You're all, and I'll tell you what, the best advice I get in my life is from my wife too. It's like,
Yeah.
that's just golden. Okay. I follow what she does all the time. Well, when we go out, for example, like when I was shooting drone videos for my drone channel, she'll do a lot of my videography. And then, she's going to be coming with me to Dayton, and she's going to be shooting a lot of the video when we go there as well. So, I mean, she's like I call her my right-hand man, but she said, don't say man. I said, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Just one of those things. So, I know you did get to Orlando. I did see some of your videos on there. Really liked your walkthrough outside with the tables, and
thank you.
And just, one of the things for me now, I've been to Orlando once and then COVID hit, and then it was just a nightmare trying to even think about it. And then this year happened to fell on our wedding anniversary, that kind of. So
yeah. What
were your impressions of HamCation this year?
Boy, I also say like the Ham Fests all have their kind of uniqueness, their own personal flair. And HamCation to me is like comfortable, I guess is the right term. Like I'm never too pressured to go from like booth to booth. I get to go talk to people, spend a little bit more time hanging out. And then obviously you've got the campers in the back, which we usually have a couple of friends with campers. So we end up migrating out there a couple of times throughout the day. It's kind of like our little oasis from the craziness. It's just a more laid back affair. I know Huntsville is usually considered like the laid back one, which I do to agree to a point, but HamCation's kind of all right there, and you kind of get to do all the things. They've got a good flea market, can't beat the weather, and it's just kind of a good little middle spot for just a fun kind of laid back ham radio ham fest kind of thing.
Yeah, and I agree. And the thing I like about it, because I haven't been to Dayton, and and I've talked to people that go to Dayton, they said put your walking shoes on. You're going to be doing a lot of walking in Dayton, and I'm planning on taking my New Balances with me. But what the nice thing about Orlando is it's like 2 buildings, and and that's it. And then there's the campers, and then there's outside with the flea market and everything. But I really liked your flea market and some of the things you found out there. I mean, it seemed to me like there was a lot of good things for sale there. And I always say this too, and see what you think about this. It always seems to me like when I go to an event, a ham fest or something like that, if I drive, I don't find anything. But if I fly, I'll always find something. It's like always.
I've never been lucky enough to go to any of the big fests without flying. And I generally find like a thing or two. I try to keep it small, though, for reasons you've already kind of hit upon. I have noticed, oddly enough, the ham fest, the swap areas kind of also have their own flair. I've noticed that you see kind of a wide swath of things at HamCation, including and a little bit more CB radios. You see a little bit more of that at HamCation. And this is not to say anything negative. I think that has its own place, and that's good too. But you see a lot of really esoteric things at HamCation. You see more like tube test units, like freestanding tube test units, and these big devices that loosely related to ham radio. A lot more Motorola type stuff I've found at HamCation. There are newer radios, I would say probably on par with that of HamVention. And then Huntsville, I would say, is like kind of where you'd go if you're a boat anchor enthusiast. There's a lot of tube radios, really nice tube radios at Huntsville.
Yeah, and it was great,
Mm-hmm.
and I had Anthony on, and I don't saw he's great. He's up in Michigan. He was there. He found a guy that does the box. I'm going to call them boxes, but the all-in-ones in the boxes. And, and he told me, he said he had such an incredible story behind him. I think he's handicapped. And just, it was just so incredible because, a lot of times, we take ourselves and, and we're going there and we're talking to vendors and everything, but yet, he spent the time to talk to him, and he's done one part of it and he's going to do another part. Just incredible. It's a family-owned business. And apparently, it's pretty popular with these all-in-one boxes. I don't know if you run across him or not.
I didn't see him. I think, was he the gentleman that had the 705 box thing? You bought the box and then you put you're talking about Shack in the Box.
Shack in the Box, yeah.
Oh, James Lee and the Lee family? Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I always see them. We always say hi and visit for a little while. During my live stream in the main building, we stopped at Shack in the Box and talked to them for a little while. They're really cool because you can see that there's a lot of work that they went into for a lot of the finishing that goes into the Go Box. Like they use these, I think they're aluminum, the plates that they do, and they do like etching on it and stuff like that. They're really quality type of boxes that they put out. Real, what feels like, handmade, although I know, most Go Boxes are all handmade by definition, but yeah, they do good stuff.
Well, I asked Jason when from Ham Radio 2.0, what did he pick up there? And he got one of the Go Boxes from the guy that does the 705 Go Boxes.
Yeah, different guy. I think that guy was in the Shack area or the swaps area. Yeah. And that's also an interesting thing because it kind of puts all the IO, the input output, like on the top plate. So you kind of just open the thing up and you can go to work.
Yeah, and I've yet to find out. I don't think he's done a follow-up video on that, but I'm real interested to see how that worked because it's a pretty much a self-contained unit, and it would be real interesting to see how all that pans out. One of the things that I've been asking people lately, that I've had on is the IC905. It seems like there's two schools of thought. It's like opening up a can of worms. It's like talking about grounding. Okay, you bring up grounding and
yes,
it's like you're going to get 1,000 different answers, and
right,
every one of them's right, and that's the way you need to do it, and all that kind of good stuff. And it's kind of seemed the same way on the 905 because what I've heard, I knew before the price came out, before HRO priced it, I knew it was going to be pricey. Okay, mm-hmm. And the other thing that I knew too was it is a niche. In fact, I heard last week when I had Rhea on and Smoke and Abe commented, well, this is probably going to be a radio for like clubs. Okay. And, and to me, the one thing that I've heard, okay, it depends upon where you live. Okay. For example, 100%. And you probably know very well in Southern California, there's probably a good microwave community out there.
Huge.
And here in Florida, I mean, it's like almost next to non-existent around here. So what are your thoughts on a 905? I'm just curious to find out.
Yeah. Well, why there's not a lot of microwave enthusiasts in Florida, right? You got no hills.
Yeah.
So Southern California, we're crazy with hills. There's so many soda summits and all that. And there's actually a really strong microwave community, so much so that the Amateur Radio Television Network, which is a YouTube channel, they're here in Southern California. And there is an active collection of amateur radio television, fast scan television enthusiasts that, are pointing their antennas all over the place throughout the day, just, streaming whatever they're doing and that kind of stuff. The 905, boy, I think you kind of hit a lot of the points. So it costs a lot because microwave's expensive. I think that's a point that's been brought up many times. Once you start going higher in frequency, the costs, start to shoot up.
Oh, yeah.
It's intrinsically line of sight most of the cases, right? So unless you're in a situation where you're using geography to kind of help you out, and you've got a community of people that are interested in it, it's kind of going to be a little bit lonely out there, I think. So if you don't have that built-in community, or you're in a community of people that kind of all want to go in together and dabble with it, it's going to be an interesting go with that radio, I think, stateside. I'm kind of curious. I don't even know, really, to be honest with you. I can make my assumptions that California, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be into it, but Florida and states where microwave's not that big, I don't know. What, in my head, it feels like a radio that was designed for Japan. So if you think of a small landmass where everybody is, then microwave's probably pretty awesome, right? Because you've got the bandwidth rates that you can do big data wirelessly in a large city like Tokyo, extremely dense, or just even some of the smaller cities. Then this radio is going to be, I think, very popular in Japan. I just, I'm waiting to see how it all kind of shakes out.
Yeah, I've been saying that the past several weeks, exactly what you said. This was made for Japan. I mean, right. When I tell people, ICOM, they're a Japanese company. Who are they going to first primarily make this radio for? It's going to be for their, right. For where they're from. And, and that's exactly what it is in this case. And, I'm thinking, and this is just me for right now. I'm thinking, a lot of people are going to take a step back and take a look and see how it does. And they're going to wait to watch, say, you have a video, Jason has a video, on the ins and outs of it, and see how it works. And also in real life, and probably wait some time. So I'm thinking sales aren't probably going to be, they'll be good like in Southern California and other areas where there's good microwaves. But, in other areas, there's going to be a wait and see kind of an attitude with this. That's what I'm kind of thinking.
I think you're right by its very nature, right? We already are a community of hams where this is a niche hobby. With going back to your comment earlier from Steve, right? It's a hobby with many different niches, right? Well, this is no different. This is a highly niche area, but kudos has to be given to ICOM for wanting to even explore this area, right? A lot of times it's been mentioned that these frequencies, that this radio, not 2 meters and 70 centimeters, but everything higher than that, is, I'm not going to say underused, like we're abandoning it or whatever, but there's definitely not as many people on these microwave frequencies as there are on 10 meters and the HF bands, 20 meters, etc. So I think it's cool that ICOM is trying to explore this market space and at least create something that's largely a turnkey type device that can get people going in this if they were so interested to do so.
Yeah. And I think it will catch on. It's just going to be one of those things, people are going to want to take a step. It's like, we talked before the show about my drone channel. A lot of times that's what I get, I'll be an early adopter. I'll buy one. I'll go through it. I'll show the pluses and minuses. And then a lot of people will pull back and wait a few months and take a look and see, and then they'll make that buying decision. And I think that's what's going to happen in this case as well. One of the best pieces of one of the best pieces of advice that I got when I first started out in ham radio was listen. Okay. Because, you go out there and you pass your test, you pass your technician test, or maybe general, and then, amateur extra, which mine all happened pretty fast. I did it within a year, and then the first thing you want to do, you want to key up that mic. And, one of the guys I saw somewhere, and I don't know exactly who it was, he said the first three things you need to do: listen, and listen. I mean, you can't get any better advice than that when you start out.
Yeah. I think it also depends on what your path to amateur radio was, right? In my attempt to be kind of brief with my background, the thing that I always did and always had growing up was a shortwave radio. So I grew up already listening, right? I grew up with, how do we make this antenna better so that I can get that hot DX shortwave station in and waking up early and going to sleep late to get, min max the time cycle for bands, right? So for if your path to amateur radio is via shortwave listening and those aspects of radio where you listen more, it's highly possible that you're kind of already adept to listening more and not transmitting as often, right? By the way, I completely support the listen, because one night you're listening to a net, and the next night you're listening to a contest, and the next night you're listening to a POTA. Those are all subtly different exchanges. And if you just barge in there and like, I'm here now, let's make this contact, you're going to get people coming back at you saying, hey, you really kind of need to pay attention and do what the Romans do in this case.
Yeah. And, lately, one of the things that I've seen, and it's just been, it's like they've come out of the woodwork, are the sad hams.
Yeah, you can thank not a Rubicon for coining that term, but I think it's
and I love him. I absolutely love his channel.
Yeah.
It's like, and who did a video recently on that? I think Ape did a video on that. I think Mike K at MRD, he did another video on that. I mean, it's like, and a lot of times what we'll do, like in the drone community, we don't give these guys oxygen. Okay.
Right.
We kind of cut them off at the knees, and I know, and I go out in some of the groups and I'm like, oh my gosh, people, you're making this thread too long, and good admins, like the admins on your page, they'll cut that off at the knees because you're giving people like that oxygen to breathe, and you want to cut them off.
It's really, there's kind of multiple ways to take that question, because that's a good comment. If you're talking about the social media aspects of amateur radio, so not the operation of the radio, right? Like just where a lot of people go to just air the dirty laundry. The problem is that quickly will consume the entire group. That's why we have a very, non-open and inclusive environment on all of the Ham Radio Crash Course social media type stuff, because we're trying to encourage people using radio, people having fun with radio. It doesn't need to be this place where people come and just are constantly complaining about stuff, or, oh, this person did this to me today and blah, blah, blah. I think his call sign is this, and it turns into a witch hunt and all that stuff. Most of the time it's like, hey guys, to be honest, most of the time you probably should just VFO away from where that's going on and move on with it. But to go back to kind of where you started this, the statement on like there's more sad hams. See, I don't know that that's true. I think what's happening, and this is a byproduct of us pointing cameras at radios and making videos, is we're encountering the people that have been doing this for a long time, and we're shining the light at it. And by shining the light at it, it's getting many more eyeballs and ears listening to what these bad actors are doing on the bands. And while it's true that a lot of this is anonymous, and it's driving people to potentially not use their call signs, because who knows, Josh might be filming this right now. I think it is helping to at least cause awareness, to at least point out to the ham radio operator, like this area and this kind of thing, sometimes people can be a little bad actor-ish. So either one, stay out of that frequency space, like 7.200 megahertz, for instance, which is, you've probably heard that before. Or if you're doing a Parks on the Air and someone's trying to jam you up on your frequency, you just hold strong and you keep going. Like you're there, and it's okay that you're operating ham radio, and it's fine. Now, that doesn't mean you argue with and fight with somebody online. You just keep doing your business and keep making your contacts and keep going. And don't be discouraged by people that have nothing better to do with their lives, I guess.
Oh yeah. That's one that's one of the things that I've seen, and I'm so glad for people that just that go out there and really, well, I know a lot of people that do POTA like every weekend, and it's something, just stick to your guns is one of the things that somebody said. Don't be rude, but stick to your guns when you're doing that. One of the things for me when I first got started here, and this is, I'll call it a tale of two clubs. Okay. Now, the immediate vicinity, right where I live, we live next to a place called Sun City Center, and it is a retirement community. It really is it's a small city, but it's a retirement community, and and then right here, and also probably about 15 miles away, There's another city called Brandon. Okay, now I've joined 2 of the clubs, and it's like a tale of 2 cities. All right, one of the clubs, well-meaning, great people there, but they're older, and
Right.
it's like me being, I'm going to be 65 this year. I would be the youngest person there. All right, and
Sure.
you look at things like their website is probably about 20 years old and is in serious need of an update.
Yeah.
They don't have a means to, you have to pay your dues by check in person to somebody,
Right.
that kind of thing. And, their activities, the communication isn't there and everything. But then conversely, I go to the other one, and then, it's like a night and day difference. They have regular Saturday breakfast for people to introduce them, and they do things other than just going out on field day and things like that to get people involved. They have different picnics, they encourage family. It's like a tale of 2 cities with that. How have you found clubs in your experience?
Much like your experience, I found the thing that I learned with clubs is, if you, the person watching, myself or whatever, if I walk into a club and it's not doing the kind of stuff I want to do, whatever it is, ham radio. I was a member of a rod and gun club here in Cerritos, California. And I came to this because of this club. If I'm not willing to stand up and be the change that I want to see in the club and have a go at making that change, and if the change doesn't happen that I want to see, or what happens a lot is you kind of get some defensiveness to making changes, to wanting to grow and come up to the modern day with technologies and tools or whatever, then that's fine. You can just say, you know what, I'll probably stay a member. I'll come to a couple of meetings, but I'm unwilling to give any more of my time. I'll make a go at it to try and see if we can make things change. But if they're unwilling to, there's no point in keep trying to swim upriver with a lot of these clubs. And no offense, I'm not throwing all clubs under the wheels here, because there are a lot of good ones like you mentioned, and we've got a couple of good ones down here, which they've got passionate people that are interested and they're doing the things that you are interested in. And then it doesn't feel like work. It feels like you're having fun with it, and you can be passionate about it and enjoy the process of giving your time and enjoying it. It's not a fight every time. And so I would encourage people that if you feel like you're fighting all the time, or you're constantly bumping your head against Robert's Rules of Order at every meeting, then maybe find a different club, shop around a little bit. But I think you got to at least give the effort to try and be the change you want to see in whatever club it is that you're working with.
Those are very wise words, because and one of the things that I hear a lot of people get really frustrated about is when they go to the meetings, it's all about Robert's Rules of Order, and they spent and very little time for socialization. Conversely, the other one, they get through their business quickly, and then they spend more time socializing than the actual meeting part, which is what it's all about. Because I know you like me, when we go somewhere, I want to be welcomed. I want to, hey Bill, how you doing? Hey Josh, good to see you. I want to have that kind of exchange with somebody, because you know what, Bill, I've been having this problem with this antenna. What do you think I should do? To have bounce ideas off of people,
Right.
And one of the other things, and I wanted to run this by you, and I've heard some differing opinions on this. Some people say YouTube is a great Elmer, and I heard conversely the other words, no, nothing is substitute for an in-person Elmer. What's your thoughts on that?
I think you can say yes to both. I think both of those things can be true. Last time I checked, there isn't an in-person Elmer service that you can just call and go meet up with an in-person Elmer, right? It's really interesting, right? So yeah, everybody wants a back pocket radio expert that they could have on speed dial and call at any moment for every solution. And for some of you, you may have that. And guess what? You're lucky, and you should thank your stars about that. For everyone else, I guess there's YouTube. I don't know. You know what I mean? You know where I'm going with this? It's like, yes, there are some individuals in YouTube that do fantastic fantastic videos. They are experts in their area, and when they're in that lane, they're killing it. They're putting out the best stuff. But so many people that go on YouTube, it's the second largest search engine in the world, are not just looking for that single lane, express route to the solution. They're looking for all this other stuff. And no Elmer, regardless of they're in person or not, is going to be able to answer every one of those questions. So what I always encourage people to do is stop necessarily looking at it as I must find the Gandalf sage that can answer all of my questions and knows all the things, and find somebody that knows how to work a problem with you. And then you all work together, and it raises the water for all ships, right? You got to be willing to be a part of the solution making when you have the question. And if you find somebody that can teach you the steps how to solve your own problems without just telling you what the solution is, that's the Elmer you want. That's the kind of mentor you want, is somebody that will grow that feeling or grow that skill in coming to your own solution.
Yeah, I agree, because, so many people, get out there, and I know somebody in the chat said, they don't have a club by them. Well, that kind of really, lends the fact that, you got to go to YouTube to do that, which, it's okay to do that, and it's like you said, yes to both. I mean, if you can get you can get a warm, breathing, living human being, to answer your question and to help you out and to work with you, that's great. If you can't, you're 99.9% assured of finding something about that on YouTube, and then asking questions, and that's the beautiful thing. It's like, I've asked you questions before, you've gotten back to me. I've asked Jason questions before, he's gotten back to me. Same with Mike, same with other people, and that's the one thing that I have to say, and that I love about this part of YouTube is, for the ham radio content creators, for the most part, 99% of them are like this. Okay. They're great. They'll get back to you. They'll answer those questions for you. I know Mike from K8MRD, he's like that too. Working with people and doing that. And that's the thing. That's the thing that I love. And that's why I, and I want to answer one of my questions that I asked you, why I got started on here, why I got started on the drone space. I'll kind of back that up.
Because drones are fun to fly.
There were a lot of great videos out there, but as you well know, being in YouTube as long as you have, the longer that video goes, the less viewers are going to be hanging on by the time that video is done. Kind of. If
drone AB comes out and then next week drone AB plus comes out, then AB videos will drop, right? But if it's an evergreen thing like building a dipole antenna, if you made the video all right, it's gonna stick around, right?
Exactly. And that's the key. One of the things was I wanted to come out with some quality content for people, because so much of that video, there's, and this is no indifference to my fellow drone content creators, but they'll be going along for several hundred feet and you don't hear anything. They're not narrating, nothing's going on. And learn to edit your videos, number one. And
please,
it's the same thing, but I've seen here, as far as ham radio content creators, people are really good with this. And, if it's a 15-minute video and gets the job done and can be evergreen, that's fine. If it takes 45 minutes to go through something, that's fine as well too, because, you're going to stick around and you're going to learn from that. And that's what I think is the most important thing about it.
Let me add something to this too, because the more I'm thinking about this, I want to give a little bit of tough love too while I'm at it. If you do have an Elmer or somebody you bounce ideas off or questions, mentors, I kind of like mentors more than Elmer, but, consider not turning them into Google if you could. If, for instance, the question that you have is something that is on a website, take the time to go search for that, right? Or, do watch a couple of YouTube videos. Because if it's something like, can I really use X amount of power on this band? What's my limit? Well, you don't necessarily need a phone call, text somebody about that. You can look that up online, right? So the good thing is that the internet has democratized all this information. And so it's all available, whether it's in blog form or the ARRL website, heck, even Wikipedia, wherever you want to go, or YouTube videos. And so a lot of that information is out there. So what you can do sometimes, if you've got, again, your Gandalf, Elmer that we're talking about here, show a little bit of respect for their time and see if you can kind of help yourself out a little bit. And then when you get stuck with that thing, that's when you go to them and say, hey, what should I do here in this particular situation? I've already tried this, and this led me to here. And I think this is blah, 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 blah. The you trying it, banging your head against the wall, you're going to be frustrated for the moment, but believe me when I tell you, you will learn more in failing to solve your answer than someone to just tell you over the phone, do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're done. Thank you very much for calling. See you later. Right? Like, you will learn so much more.
Oh yeah, and that's I've been in IT my whole career, and that's been the same thing. I learned through my failures. I've learned how it's an invaluable tool. I mean, failure. I mean, that's one of my managers years ago called failure one of the best tools out there, and he was right, and I do agree with him on that. One of the things for me, as far as something that I go overboard on, it's like my wife says, "Do you have enough antennas?" And I go, "No." It's like I'll see an antenna on sale, like click buy. I'll see another one, yeah. And I pull my drawer open, and she says, "You going to use all those?" Well, yeah, I'm using all those.
Yeah.
What is it for you, Josh, that you just are just like weak in the knees about for ham radio that you can't say no to?
Tiny QRP radios.
Okay.
I love QRP. So I have this, and I'm so bad at this. I'm failing in my own romantic ham radio goal. I love radios like the Mountain Topper, right? I love tiny Morse code only radios that just run off of a 9-volt. And every time you turn it on, only DX comes through the speaker, right? Like I love these tiny radios that fit into a Crown Royal bag that's, super tiny, right? And it takes up no space in your pack, and it's just beautiful, and you have a great time. I love that. Like the Soda Goat. Do you remember Steve? He used to make a lot of videos. That kind of stuff just drove me nuts as I was getting into HF and stuff, and getting more active in parks or summits on the air. So anything that's like that, I can just put it in a bag and it goes along with me, is my most favorite amateur radio stuff. And so obviously that's antennas and keys and sometimes tiny little laptops or cheap laptops, all that stuff, the bags that they all go in. That is like my big love in the hobby, because, again, to reiterate, I'm 40. So I got a wife, I got kids. They're always doing something. They always need my time to be at the thing that they're doing something, right? So for me, I try to bring ham radio with me whenever I go. I seldom get the day that I'm free to just have a ham radio day, Josh. Don't, if the family wants to come, that's fine, but we're doing ham radio, guys. It's always me going along to something and sneaking ham radio in at every little moment. So that's always my jam, is like, how do I fit ham radio into my life even more than it already is, right?
Well, one of the things I really liked your video on your F-150, and I thought
thank you.
That was well done. And I really like it because, so many people make it to be like, a political thing or whatever. But you know what?
Yes.
For you explained it so well. I mean,
thank you.
It just it made perfect sense for you.
Right.
Seriously, and that's what I tell people. And it's like, I was so afraid. I was like, oh my gosh, people are just gonna. But no, I saw the comments in there, and they were all great comments.
It was pretty hospitable in the comments, and I was really surprised. My goal with that is, one, so that I would have a video to just point people to explain why I use an electric vehicle, which is, along with gas. I still have a gas vehicle, but to do that. But I think it was to also try and to correct misconceptions a bit.
Yeah.
It like you said, it's become politicized. And once you politicize something, all objectivity flies out the window. Yeah. People draw a line in the sand and they say, I'm in this party or I'm in this party. And I kind of always, regardless of what it is, ham radio or otherwise, I try and remind people to be objective and to see what the other person is saying. Again, it's not probably the solution for you, but their point of view might be a subtle correction to a list of things that you had a misconception about. So EVs are an example, but radio has a similar connotation in some of those areas as well.
Well, I know you got you just put a radio in there too. How's that working out?
Fantastic. So far, no issues.
No issues. Good.
I've had HF in the vehicle, right? So I had my KX2 hooked to an antenna that I had attached to the roof, not magnet because it's an aluminum body. So I had to figure out another latching mechanism. No noise, no major problems. And I mentioned this in the video that as far as EVs go in ham radio, they're oftentimes not that noisy. The only times you get noise is when there's this transition from drive power back into the battery, or if you're charging actively, like at a high-speed charging station. It's the hybrids I've found that seem to create more noise when they're converting engine power back into DC to get into the battery, and that process that can be noisy sometimes. But everything I said in the video it's a caveat though. Some companies are really good, some companies are not so good, and then even the same company could have one model of hybrid that's not great and then another model that's totally fine. So if you are interested in EVs and you are a ham and you want to put radios in there, you do owe it to yourself to go to the dealership before buying and trying out the radios. Otherwise, you could be in a situation where it's not great.
That's a really smart idea, and I like the truck. I really do. And for you, it's perfect. I mean, it just fits in. Your HOV lanes. We don't have them here in Florida, but it really fits in for you, and it makes perfect sense because my gosh, do you want to spend all your time on the road? Driving back and forth to work? And like, no, we don't want to do that. So yeah, that absolutely makes perfect sense. And I'm real pleased to hear that you're not having any radio problems in there either, because that was one of the things, I know some other people have talked about quite a bit. I know you said you've had a passion for QRP and, and QRP radios. And another piece of advice that I got from somebody when I first started out is, if you want to do a, you're an amateur extra and you want to do something, don't get like a 705, get a 7300. Okay.
Yeah.
Because if you're new at it, QRP is going to frustrate the daylights out of you. And I couldn't agree more with something like that.
There's also a cost associated with this stuff, right? It's expensive stuff. And if you're talking to a ham that's, freshly minted ham, you're like, what's this all about? The good news is that QRP is actually more viable than ever because we're rolling into the high sun cycle. So yeah, why not? Give it a shot. Who cares? 10 meters, you're probably going to do just fine. With that said, are you going to tell somebody to go out and buy a $1,200 7300 or a $1,200 705? In most cases, I would probably say newer ham, 7300 for sure. Get the 100 watts. It's still portable, but if you're not going out every day or every weekend to be portable, then you don't really need to have that capability. So yeah, 100 watt radio is probably where I would go most of the time.
Yeah. And that, it works really well. One of the things that I really like what you've done is your bags, and you go through your bags that you put together, but the emphasis on first aid, because, even doing POTA, okay. Of course, most of them are made for soda, but also for POTA, when you're going outside, you're subject to, an environment, things happen out there. And, that's one of the things that I've seen with your videos, you're really well prepared when you're going out and doing like soda. I mean, you really have covered everything from A to Z and then in between.
Well, I try to. I'm sure I can always do better, but to mention a friend, K6ARK, right? We've had him on the stream before, search and rescue volunteer. You hear stories of him and what he's dealing with or what he has dealt with. And you go, boy, I don't want to end up like that, particularly on a Summits on the Air. So what do? Well, a little planning, a first aid kit, personal first aid kit is super important. You should definitely have that. And then the question is, okay, well, what should I have? And then that turns into a whole YouTube rabbit hole deep dive as well, because there's a ton of first aid channels out there that help a lot. I did a video with Kevin W6RIP and Adam K6ARK, and they kind of gave their thoughts on a couple of first aid kits. I've had USN ER Doc. He's another really good YouTuber that talks about first aid. He is a United States Navy ER doctor, and he talked about different stuff like that. But if you're going out in the field, particularly on a Summits on the Air, I never want to really be a burden on anyone else if I can prevent having to call search and rescue or emergency or whatever. So little things that you can throw in the bag can not only help you, could potentially help another in saving a life, or just helping them not be in pain. And family, right? If you got family with you, you got to be prepared for that kind of stuff. At least that's always kind of my opinion. A bit of that, I think, is coming from my legacy as a Boy Scout.
Well, yeah. Well, I got just to relay a quick story. My son-in-law and daughter, and this before they were married, they were at a cabin in southeastern Ohio, and my daughter looked the wrong way and she stepped and she broke her ankle, and it was bad. Okay. Now, my son-in-law was a sniper in the Army. Oh, and wow. The first thing he did, obviously, he has a first aid kit in the car, but one of the first things he did was pop about 5 or 6 Advil into my daughter's mouth and told her to swallow them. And right away he got her to an ER, and he carried her. He said that adrenaline, it just kicked in and he picked her right up. Now my daughter's like about 5'3", so she's not terribly huge, but sure. With that rush of adrenaline, picked her up, got her in, and got her taken care of. And, and it's good to know, he said all that stuff, he had long since been out of the Army, but all that stuff kicked back in just like that. It just, he didn't skip a beat, he said, when that happened. And I got to give him a lot of props to that. So what piece of ham radio equipment that you don't have that you want to get?
See, you got me with a good question. If it's if you could only have one radio, what would it be? It's 705 because it kind of does everything. What is a piece of ham radio equipment I want that I haven't gotten? Well, I mean, I do want the 905 because I want to experiment with it and try it out. But I'm sure I have another answer to that question. Oh, you got me stumped with that's a good one. I have so many plans on videos and things like going, months out into the future, and all that stuff is stuff I already have. I just haven't been able to build it yet. I'm hurting for my 80-meter antenna. That's been down for far too long, but I already have that antenna, but it's not deployed yet. So I have a PAR NFEDS antenna that is a legal limit. So I'm looking forward to put that up. I guess I don't have it because it's not on the air yet, so I'll take the cheater way on that one. I do. Somebody said Flex. I do want to try out a Flex radio. I had a great time playing with the Hermes Lite a couple of live streams ago, and so I do kind of want to try out a Flex because their approach to interfacing the radio and the remoting capability, I think, is unique to them, and it's a novel approach to it. So that's kind of exciting. The tower from John Amadeo. Oh my gosh, I would love to have the tower from John Amadeo, but I know my wife would not allow that. That just isn't going to work in this current home.
Yeah, see, that's the one thing for me, and I had it was great. I first got started on YouTube with ham radio. T.O. invited me on the Coffee and Ham Radio show on Saturday, and one of the things they wanted to talk about, like drones with ham radio, and one of the things that I was very keen on and well aware of, there's some drop and release mechanisms for the drones, and it's just like getting that antenna up in that tree is it's not like getting a potato shooter, potato launcher, or slingshot, or just you fly over it, you have the gimbal pointed down, boom, you're done, you got it up there. I mean, it's perfect every time as far as that's concerned. One of the things that I wanted to ask you was, your wife's a ham too, isn't she?
She is a licensed technician. Yes, okay. She is.
Okay. I'm trying to get mine at least to get a technician license. How was that? Did you have can you tell me about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It took over a year of weekly episodes of a podcast where I made is the wrong word. I encouraged her to take the practice test while we recorded the podcast. That's the trick. I started a podcast. That's how I got my wife to get her license. My route is totally non-standard. And to be honest, she's not very active. She doesn't do much with it other than she knows how to use the handheld now. She knows how to use the radio in her car. She understands the simple things, and she's currently working towards her general, which she's been taking practice exams for that. So, yeah, I guess my piece of advice that I always have for folks is take them along or include them in whatever aspect of amateur radio that you're passionate about. I've heard that there are a number of spouses that got introduced to radio, or at least were kind of encouraged to get into radio from following their husband along on some Parks on the Air activations. And given enough times, you probably will have a situation where you could ask them to maybe run a couple of contacts with your call sign. And that may start a fire. It may create some kind of interest there. In my wife's case, she is the most interested in it from kind of an emergency preparedness point of view and how it would fit into a community type response thing and being more active in the community, particularly during an emergency, like out here with earthquakes or whatnot. So that was kind of her leg in the door, if you will.
Yeah. And that's what I've been desperately trying to kind of like, gently persuade my wife at least to get a technician, just for the ability to communicate during those times, because, obviously, when hurricane season hits down here, it's, we actually had a pretty good one come through last year. And, and I'm hoping, well, it prompted us. One of the things that we ended up doing, we ended up buying a propane powered permanent generator, or not propane, but natural gas.
Okay.
Yeah, it's costly, but it's really nice because we were without power for like 2.5, 3 days. And, Florida, the temperature fluctuation here is crazy. But, for the most part, it's going to be up in the 80s and the 90s and humidity. And it's just, you need to have that. And I think that's kind of prompted her on this end too. So we'll see. I'm kind of like trying, like you, is to maybe gently nudge her in that direction. So hopefully that will get things going as far as that's concerned. One of the things that I've wanted, as far as, I wanted to answer that question that you asked about what piece of equipment do I want?
Oh yeah, please.
I look at the 7610 and I'm like, it's like drool coming out of my mouth, and I got to get a napkin and wipe it off. It's just, it's just like, to me, and I've told somebody, it's like that old saying, the bee's knee. I mean, it does everything and then some. And, and I'm like, pace yourself, Bill. It's like, you don't, as my dad used to say, Rome wasn't built in a day, and there'll be plenty of time for that. Enjoy, and one of the things that we say in the drone community is enjoy what you have, what you're flying with, because constantly we're talking about new products, new things coming out. And the same with the ham radio. But, it's the same piece of advice I have with ham radio. Enjoy what you have right now. If you're using a Baofeng and it's working for you, good. That's great. If you just bought a Yaesu FT-60R and it's working great, good. You don't have to get the latest bells and whistles if it's working for you. But if it's not working, then you get out there and you find out why. Is it that antenna that you have? Well, I got to say this. Okay, the best antenna that I've ever gotten. Okay, and I have all kinds. Okay, I found out about Ed Fong, and I'm like, oh my gosh. It's like I died and went to antenna heaven. And he's, he actually answered my email because, everybody said he's so busy, you'll never get a hold of him. He answered my email. He could not have been nicer, Josh. Oh my gosh. I was doing cartwheels, and my wife's like, why are you so excited about getting an email? And I'm just like,
I thought he was very responsive in emails. I thought that everybody told me that, oh no, he'll be on videos. He'll talk to you, whatever. Not me specifically, but like just, anybody. I thought that he loves talking about his antennas and stuff.
Yeah, it was a couple of days, but then he responded back to me, and I was like, my gosh, he is just absolutely in that antenna just made a difference in my life. I mean, seriously, you go from like what you had to that, and it's like, oh my gosh.
So many things you've mentioned that are good points. I'll leave you with, I'll mention this quote because I think it's an important one. As much as ham radio is a hobby of many niches, ham radio is a marathon, not a sprint. So whatever it is that you're trying to attain knowledge of, understanding of, or the physical components of in ham radio, you should take your time in getting there. And it's for a number of reasons. Sometimes you just can't shortcut it, like learning Morse code. You can't, there's no secret to it. You got to do it. Buying gear, well, there's no point in buying a radio that you're not ready for, that you haven't kind of worked your way up to. And just becoming more proficient at using the radio, becoming a good operator takes time, takes doing. Becoming good at contests takes time, takes doing. Doing POTA, Parks on the Air. There is no video I can make like, this is the one best Parks on the Air antenna, because everybody's situation varies so greatly. Some parks you can't put an antenna in the tree. Some parks you can't really do a radial system on the ground because there's too many kids running around and they'll trip and, blah, blah, blah. So there's no like one answer for any one ham generally, but it's nice to consider that ham radio is going to be there for you. It's not going away. It's never going to go away. So it's nice that you can always just come back to it and kind of build upon what you've been doing and have projects for yourself. Give yourself challenges, but make them realistic. Now, the 7610 thing, boy, I want to reply on that one. So I used the 7300 for years. That was the primary shack radio for all of my live streams. The reason why I went with the 7610 was really like three things. It was the diversity receive, because you could have, it's basically got two receivers. So you can have two separate antennas, which I now have, which is nice. The larger screen, but it's actually, for my live streams, is one of the major reasons, because it has that HDMI output so that I can pipe it into my live stream so that, while we're sitting here doing this, I can just pull up, or where is it? I can pull up the screen like that and it should pop up. Maybe. Uh-oh, there it is.
There it is.
So yeah, I can just demonstrate like live on the screen. Hey, I'm touching buttons out here, right? There you go. I'm controlling the all that stuff. So it actually becomes a lot more of a teaching aid and demonstration kind of thing than anything for me. But for some people, they don't need that capability. They just want to have a nice little monitor that they can see, and that's good enough kind of thing.
Well, I really liked what you just said. That's another thing that's going to live with me, that it's a marathon and not a sprint. And I think that's so true because, for me, for example, CW, I have no clue. I haven't started it. And, if I want to take it up in a year or two, I'm going to do that, and it's like, you can do it at your leisure. There's no timetable. There's no saying, it's like projects at work, this is due by this date and this is due by this date. There's no due date with this. It's like, you want to do it, you want to do it. It's like some people with FT8, they've never done it before. They'll dabble into it. Others will say, that's not an area that I'm comfortable with. I'm gonna be doing POTA or SOTA or something else. It's like you have so many different avenues that you can take with this, and that is probably one of the best things that I've had with this, Josh. Is like, there's just so much you can do. And, you'll never get bored. I mean, really, seriously.
If you'd have to try to be bored in ham radio, I feel. Now, I will. The caveat that goes along with that is do attempt to try some of these different things, because this goes back to the whole objectivity thing. There's a lot of people that, not big fans of FT8, but I'll argue that a lot of them that are probably the most vocal in saying, FT8's not real ham radio, is they probably haven't done much of it. They probably haven't used it, and they probably don't know how to use it very well, even if they got it set up. So I always encourage people to not be negative about something that they haven't tried. And until you've tried it, it's really hard to come from a place of understanding and make an opinion that's worth a grain of salt without actually knowing something about it. So that means try it. It's good stuff.
Exactly. And that's what I'm probably within the next year or so. One of my goals is, one of the things, I write down, I don't do a New Year's resolution list. I write a list down of things that I'd like to try to do for the year. Okay. And if I get to it, fine. If not, there's next year. I'm not going to worry about that. But one of the things that's on the list is CW. That's one of the things that You know, I can remember from my early days, and you really sparked a great memory for me, because my parents, I think I was 15 or so, they went to Radio Shack. They got me Realistic 9-band with shortwave on it, you know, and I'm listening out there at night. I'm listening to like the BBC and other stuff. And, you know, I'm just like, my ears, you know, I'm out sitting out in the backyard, 11 o'clock at night, you know, that antenna's all the way up, you know, and I'm pulling this in, and, you know, it's like the world is right there for me,
Right.
you know. And then I come across the CW station, you know, it's just like listening to that. I was just like so bitten and smitten by that. So yeah, it's going to happen one of these days. One of the questions I wanted to get to before we close shop here is, okay, one of the things, I was ready to pull the trigger on an ICOM IC 7100, and then boom, gone, history.
Gone.
Okay. Adios. Okay. Now I've heard two things about this. Okay. One, you know, the obvious is, you know, they ran out of parts, the parts supplier shortage, and all that kind of good stuff. The other thing that I heard was probably midsummer, it's probably going to come back. What have you heard on that?
I will give you two answers for this.
Okay.
One, obviously, I have a bit of a relationship with ICOM because of HamNation and all that stuff. And while I will say, like, you know, I've heard about some things like the 905, right? I had a little bit of forehand knowledge, particularly before Huntsville, before we shot that video and whatnot. Second answer, specifically to your question, I have heard nothing regarding the 7100. I have heard nothing. So your guess is as good as mine. I will say, I did ask Ray months ago. I'm like, hey, I think the world needs a replacement for the 7100. Is it, you know, what are we can you tell me anything about it? Is that a thing? And he's like, no, it's still for sale. We're still making them. But my understanding is, you know, much like a lot of the manufacturers, they've had trouble getting the parts they need to bring the radios to market. We've seen that on brand new radios. We've seen that on older radios, and we're seeing it with the 7100 as well. That's my that's my personal assumption. I got nothing from Ray. He was tight-lipped about all of that, other than to say it's still in production. They're still selling it. You know, it's still a good radio. People love it. I'm like, yeah, all that sounds right. So, you know, that's what I know.
Yeah, and you know, and I gotta say this. You know, I've seen, you know, people talking with Ray on videos and everything. He seems like just such a great guy. He really does.
Oh, he's great. He's really knowledgeable. He is. I think the cool thing about Ray, and you know, everybody in the chat can kind of hopefully have experienced this. Talking to him in person's a lot of fun. You get into kind of a rhythm with him, and you just end up going back and forth. And he's like that at the Ham Fest when he's surrounded with people. He's sitting there talking with people all day. So you know, he really must be passionate about it and enjoys it, because he'll just kind of hang out and have fun with everybody. And he's got good ideas. I've bounced a couple of video ideas off of him, not even related to ICOM or anything like that. And he's been really helpful. Good guy from all my experience with him, for him being a friend of mine.
Yeah, he really seems like that. So, you know, our hour is over, and I want to give you back some time so you can probably, you know, enjoy some food and socialize with your family and everything. And, you know, I know the time difference, and I really appreciate your getting on, Josh, because, you know, I'll say it like it is. Okay. Yeah. You're one of my ham radio heroes. Okay.
Oh,
you know,
thank you.
I'm
just another ham. I just happen to drag a camera along with me, like you'd probably drag along a drone, or now a camera, but same kind of concept.
Well, you know, and it's like I said the same thing with Jason too. I mean, you know, especially you two, because you know, both of you first got me started. You were out there. It seemed like every question I needed to get answered, I'd either find it in your video or Jason's video. And, you know, it really got the ball rolling for me. And, you know, and that's one thing that I tell people, you know, with ham radio, the beauty of it is, you know, you're going to 9 times out of 10, you're going to find what you need out there. And like you said, you know, it's the number 2 search engine in the world. You know, you'll find it. It'll be there. So, Josh, hang on a sec as I close things down.
Can I answer one thing really quick?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Mike B, the drone ranger. I've never signed an NDA, so it's nothing like that. I promise you. I don't have any more information. Go ahead. You take it away. Thank you so much.
Mike's one of my drone guys, so
Yeah,
I know Mike pretty well, and
Yeah.
you know, a lot of the guys, when they assume that they won't come on a show, or that they're tight-lipped about something, that they're under NDA.
They know
So,
what's going on. Yeah.
Mike's a great guy. But no, I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. It was a great. I watched the chat. You guys were great in that. You know, I'm looking forward to meeting Josh out at HamVention, along with a ton of other people. Looking forward to having some fun. I'm going to be having Matt on from Minnesota next week. So
cool.
Stay tuned for that. And I got Frank from Tank Radio. He's coming up as well too. And Frank is, Anthony told me about Frank, and Frank is just a ball of fire. It's what he is.
Ball of energy and fire. Yeah, that is a good way.
He really is. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Josh, thanks so much for spending some time with us tonight. As always, guys, have a great rest of your evening, and 7 3s to everybody.
73. Thank you.